Office Box 526852, Miami, Florida 33152, USA.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Wavescan, the International DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson, and produced today in the studios of KVOH in Simi Valley, California. With me today are Ray Robinson of KVOH and Jerry Plummer of WWCR in Nashville, Tennessee. This is edition NWS 431 for release on Sunday, May 28, 2017. On Wavescan today, California trees serve as a successful antenna system. This is the news in Morse code. We'll be telling you about the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters 2017 annual meeting, which took place right here in Simi Valley. And our QSL of the week, a historic QSL card from Radio Andorra Shortwave. Experimentation in the transmission and reception of wireless signals with a tree forming the antenna system began here in California during the year 1904. The two locations for these interesting experiments were in the San Francisco area, and the experimenter was George Owen Squire, who went on to become General George Squire, Chief Signal Officer of the United States Army at its general headquarters in Washington, D.C. Here's Ray Robinson with the story of California tree antennas.
Hi, Jeff. You know, I checked the date on this one in case it was April the 1st, but I guess this did actually happen, and George Squire really did prove that trees may be used not just to support antennas, but to actually perform as antennas themselves. The twin California locations for his initial series of wireless experiments were at Campo Tascadero, on the edge of the flowing stream at Tascadero Creek. It's near Santa Barbara, California, about 100 miles northwest of Los Angeles, and also at Fort Mason on the edge of San Francisco Bay. No doubt the nearby waterways enhanced the wireless transmissions back in the year 1904. George Squire discovered that the best results in the usage of a tree as the antenna system were obtained by driving a nail into the tree and attaching a wire to the nail. The tree needs to be alive and preferably with a full canopy of leaves, thus with a good flow of internal sap in the trunk of the tree. A dead tree does not perform satisfactorily as a radio antenna. During the tragic days of World War I, some of the Signal Corps wireless stations in different areas of the United States and elsewhere were instructed to experiment with the usage of living trees as a wireless antenna, for transmitting as well as for receiving. It was discovered that the performance of a tree as an antenna was actually equal to that of a random wire, with the added advantage of less static. After the spate of experimentation in California with the infamous imported eucalyptus trees from Australia, Squire himself re-began a new series of experiments 15 years later, in 1919, this time on the edge of Washington, D.C. With the wireless equipment installed in a simple hut and a nearby tree as the antenna, he was able to tune in wireless signals in Morse code from across the Atlantic, from the high-powered German station at Nauen, as well as from French and English stations and from ships at sea. Surprisingly, it was discovered that the same tree could be used as the antenna, as well as the grounded counterpoise earthing system. Simple wire netting used as the earthing counterpoise was also successful. However, if single wires are laid on the ground as a counterpoise, the signal from a particular direction was enhanced with an increase in the number of counterpoise wires in that same direction. Best results, he discovered, were obtained when the nail for the antenna was driven into the tree trunk about 2/3 of the total height of the tree. A single nail, preferably copper rather than iron, which rusts, works satisfactorily, though a maximum number of 6 or 8 nails does enhance the received signals. The received signals are not diminished if additional receivers are hooked directly into the tree trunk. In addition, it was discovered that the tree antenna can be used equally effectively at any point in the electronic spectrum. It works for long wave, medium wave, or short wave. The wireless signals received from a tree are not affected by rain, nor by any other nearby trees. and the type of tree apparently makes no difference. Local two-way wireless communications in Morse as well as in speech can be readily carried on with the use of a tree at each end for both receiving and transmitting. Additional scientific experiments in the usage of a tropical jungle growth as a radio antenna were conducted by the American Army in Panama in 1972. It was discovered that trees form a better antenna than do ferns or other less developed forms of undergrowth. It was also discovered that the signal strength of a transmitted signal is enhanced if a matching toroidal coil transformer is inserted between the end of the feeder line and the insertion point into the tree. It might also be added that the use of trees as the antenna system for radio signals received attention during the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s. Although on occasions this activity was another spate of additional experimentation, there were many notable occasions when it became a quick and easy form of practical reality. These days, there is a small group of international amateur radio operators who are experimenting with tree antennas. This procedure is as much a novelty for them as it is an experimental procedure. And while we're talking about trees in association with radio, there's another form of electrical experimentation with trees that is of real interest. In 2005, Khz Shortwave, president of MagCap in the United States, began experimenting with the use of a tree as a natural source of electrical energy. He developed his new theory on the fact that trees are often a target for a discharge of lightning during a storm. He discovered that a low-level irregular DC current will flow through a wire that's connected between a spike in a tree and a rod driven into the ground. The electrical level is measured at around 3/4 volt, and in a cascade series of smoothing circuits, the electrical level can actually be increased to around 12 volts at 1 amp. Interestingly, it was discovered that the power level is highest during the season when the tree has the most foliage.
Thank you, Ray. And you're listening to a special edition of Wavescan coming to you from Simi Valley, California. We'll be telling you about the NASB annual meeting in just a few moments. Well, these days, it is quite a simple matter to tune in to the bulletins of news on your car radio as you're commuting to your place of employment and on your family TV receiver in the morning as you're getting ready for another day of work, and in the evening when you're relaxing at the end of each work day. But back 100 years ago, if you wanted to acquaint yourself with an update on the latest news events around the world, you would need to know how to operate a clumsy wireless receiver, and you would need to be proficient in Morse code. Isn't that right, Ray?
Soon after the invention and development of wireless in the early days of Marconi and other experimenters in Europe and the United States, the transmission of news and information across the Atlantic began to feature prominently in the commercial business world. Two leading newspapers in New York City established their own receiving and transmitting stations for the purpose of receiving and disseminating news by wireless. In 1910, the New York Herald established a wireless station in the United States Barge Office at the Battery in New York City under their own informal call sign OHX. The antenna wires were strung across a busy street between two multi-story commercial buildings. This new wireless station received news dispatches mainly from the British Isles and continental Europe, though also from other parts of the world as well. In addition, station OHX also transmitted wireless news for the benefit of newspapers elsewhere in the United States and in other overseas countries. As an advertising venture and a service to their land-based readers, on January the 16th, 1912, the New York Herald sent a bulletin of news in Morse code to the German express passenger liner SS Berlin as it was traversing the Atlantic. The shipboard printing press printed the information as a wireless newspaper for the benefit of passengers. During the era before World War I, the news information from the New York Herald wireless station was also transmitted from the maritime communication station CC on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and also from the new wireless station at Hillside in San Francisco, California. In this way, they were able to disseminate their news and information on a worldwide basis. When the New York Herald wireless station was taken into service, its transmissions were heard on the long-wave channel of 640 meters, 470 kilohertz. The informal call sign OHX was dropped in favour of a regularised call sign WHB in 1913, in accordance with the new international regulations governing the wireless spectrum. Not to be outdone, another newspaper in New York City, the New York Times, also established its own wireless station under the amateur call sign 2UO. At one stage, this station was also on the air with a regular bulletin of news in Morse code for the benefit of an international audience. However, they found themselves in difficulty due to the fact that they were using an amateur wireless station for a commercial purpose. Soon after the end of World War I, in 1919, a commercial company in England began the regular transmission of news bulletins in Morse code for the benefit of news organizations throughout the world. These news bulletins were received in the United States, as well as in distant outposts of the Empire, in India, Australia, and New Zealand. The daily news bulletins from the British official wireless press were presented in Morse code from a new long-wave station located at Leafield in Oxfordshire. These news bulletins from transmitter GBL for Leafield, with 300 kilowatts on long-wave, were observed by station VLB at Awarua, at the southern tip of the South Island of New Zealand. 7 years later, in 1926, the daily news service from London was transferred from Leafield